Go to pre-selected agenda items. We have 5 agenda items where something has been pulled so that we can have a discussion. After that, we will go into executive session. So just to give you an idea, we're going to go item 126, 124, 128, 129, and 131. I'll start with 126. That was the first one I was made aware of. That's what we're doing, is going in that order. So with that, I will recognize Councilmember Poole.
Thanks, Mayor. I also want to thank my co-sponsors on item 126, Councilmember Vella, Mayor Pro Tem Ellis, Councilmember Kadri, and Mayor Watson, and their staff for joining me on working on this initiative. And I want to thank our staff, Assistant City Manager Veronica Briseno, Director Middleton Pratt, and our legal team, including Trish Link and Linda Garfield and Brent Lloyd, who I think is still a lawyer, even though he's not still in legal, still doing good work for us on zoning and land development issues. I didn't intend to talk too much about this today. Instead, I wanted to point everybody to the extensive message that I put up last night on the message board. And also, it goes into significant detail, and it also has frequently asked questions with some photographs of the housing typology that this resolution would contemplate in larger numbers. So that is all on the message board. The photos give you a sense of the smaller single-family homes, townhomes, cottage courts, and I would point to the City of Austin's Miller development that's on the old airport site for good examples and prototypes for what this kind of multiplicity of typology for housing could look like. So we're in the process of kicking off this conversation. This is the beginning. I think some folks in the community were worried that we had already made these decisions. And I just remind folks that we have a very Austin process in our city and with the city of Austin. We have very well established public input procedures, and we will take all advantage of those over the next year plus when we have the conversation that we are initiating with our decisions this week. There was another bit of misinformation that was floating out in the community that I wanted to address specifically along the lines of how the decision had already been made and this wasn't going to be a public process and there wasn't going to be any conversations, which is not true. Another thing that's been floating out there, and I talk about it in my message board post, is the fact that this proposal does away with multifamily zoning. And it just flat out does not do that. It makes for potentially narrower lot sizes as single-family zones, doesn't turn them into multifamily housing. I hope I said that right initially.
No, initially, you said it would do away with multifamily, and you meant single-family.
That's right, yes. Thank you. We're not doing away with single-family zoning and replacing it with multifamily zones. What we are doing is potentially narrowing the size of the lots so that more single-family homes can be built side by side in our neighborhoods, which I think will preserve the character of our neighborhood. It will certainly make opportunities for middle-class homeowners to stay in our city, and I hope raise their families, which will contribute to the health of our public school system. So the name of this initiative is HOME, which stands for Home Options for Middle Income Empowerment, and it is targeted for middle income earners. The city has significant and numerous programs for people who are low income earners. People who make good salaries may not need assistance much from their government. As a member of the middle class for I guess my entire life, I feel the real need to make my own way without government programs in large part, and I can do that But I also recognize that if I were starting out today, I would not be able to buy a home in the central city. And so as I considered what our options have been, the work that we've done in the past, work that I and my allies pre-pandemic worked on in the subquorum on the Land Development Code and LDC 2.0, the idea of 3 units by right was something that we talked about in our subquorum. We discussed bringing that forward as an initiative, as a way forward. Unfortunately, because of a number of different circumstances, including the Acuna lawsuit, the mayor pulled the plug on our discussions of the Land Development Code, as you all remember. I'm trying to remember if that was in 2019 or 2018. Time is weird pre-pandemic for me anymore. But at any rate, we stopped those conversations. And so the concept of 3 by right for SF1, SF2, and SF3 did not go forward. But it may sound familiar to some who are listening in. So this concept, I think, we are ready for it. I think we're ready as a community to have this difficult conversation. I'm really optimistic about the impacts that this proposal can have in the future. I've been looking for ways to have gentle, organic density and growth in our inner city. And I reference Chuck Marone a lot with Strong Towns. He was the one who talked to us. He came to the city and talked to some council members back in 2017, 2018 about how to densify gently and how to do it in ways that preserve the very character of the communities and the neighborhoods that we so value here. And this is one way to do that. So I'll just leave that there. I actually talked a little bit longer than I intended to, but thank you, Mayor, for letting me introduce this.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
I just want to extend my appreciation to Councilmember Poole for her work on this. I know our offices have been discussing concepts like this together for quite a while now, and it's been great to find a partner in creative solutions to try to make sure that, the average Austinite can afford to buy a home. As we see with a lot of the studies that come out that ABOR does all the time, it's, how much housing stock do we have on the market? How much is the cost of housing spiking due to an interest in people getting into the housing market? And there's a lot of fluid conversations around what causes that and how to solve it. But it's really important that we work together to find these innovative solutions. Like Councilmember Poole said, this is not a done deal. This is something that we want to kick off. We want to have the conversation. We absolutely want community input. You know that she has been a supporter of having robust community involvement for a very long time. And so I'm looking forward to us being able to advance this conversation. There's a lot of folks, your average Austinite that don't know what rent's going to be, and they don't have any equity in renting. I'm a renter myself, and so I feel those pains very strongly when rent goes up. But I think it's important that we come together and we try to find workable solutions, and I think there's probably everyone on this dais has come up with some creative solution to try to solve this issue, and so we are definitely working hard on it. And I appreciate that this is coming at a very similar time where we're set to have a public hearing and take action on bringing the 3- and 4-plex units into the same process that single family and duplex have been able to do for a long time. And so I think we're making some real meaningful change here, and appreciate all the co-sponsors that have chimed in to work on this with Councilmember Poole.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Councilmember Poole. All right, Councilmember Cadre and then Councilmember Ryan Alter.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to thank Councilmember Poole today. I also want to thank her staff, and also just want to shout out all the co-sponsors on this. I think this is one of the most impactful code initiations of this year, if passed on Thursday. I'm really excited about so many things with it. One, how smaller homes on smaller lots will help everyone better afford a home in Austin, from young people to first responders to older folks who want to age in place. And as someone who loves to walk everywhere, including City Hall every morning, this resolution will also promote a more walkable Austin for everyone, and will help make Project Connect more successful. It's also important to highlight what this won't do. And I know Councilmember Poole touched on some of the misinformation or disinformation out there, but what it won't do, for example, and it's a complaint I've heard, is that we don't have the infrastructure for density, when in fact, sprawl causes more strain on our limited resources in city infrastructure. Creating more compact neighborhoods allows us to use our existing infrastructure and resources more efficiently. So all I want to say, which has been said, which will probably continue to be said, thank you, Councilmember Poole, for your leadership on this, and I'm excited to pass this on Thursday.
At risk of being a dead horse here, I think this is wonderful, and I want to thank you for your work. I would also like to be added as a co-sponsor if that is all right. I just wanted to comment on two things that I believe the resolution covers, but one conversation I had with somebody a while ago, unrelated to this, was they were talking about, they had a very small house in the front of their lot, and they wanted to build a larger structure in the back, but the ADU rules prevented them from essentially making the front one an ADU and the back one the home that they were hoping to build. So I think by your inclusion of the flexibility for housing configurations is key, because it's going to allow people to really use their lot in the most appropriate manner. And so I think that's a great element there. And then lastly, I just wanted to kind of highlight something you said about it being organic. You know, this is not forcing everyone to go subdivide their lot into 2,500 square feet. This is allowing somebody who chooses to do that the option to do that. And I think that's really key going forward. So that's all I have today. Thanks so much.
Councilmember Alison Alter, then Councilmember Velasquez.
Thank you. Clearly, there's a majority in support of this, but I want to be clear that I do not intend to support this proposal as drafted, and I'm particularly concerned about the significant amount of public interest we've seen on this item, largely with questions and concerns, and the inability to address them in the short amount of time that we have. This departs drastically from what we did in previous iterations, and I don't think that we fully understand the consequences. I will not be voting in favor of this, and I want to be clear why. This resolution as drafted goes significantly further than any permutation of our planning staff's code next or land development code rewrite. This resolution states that many peer cities, such as San Diego, Philadelphia, and San Antonio, offer a range of more modest lot sizes. And I want to be clear that I'm entirely open to offering a range of smaller lot sizes. But to offer that option is very different than unilaterally doing what this resolution initiates, which is to simultaneously reduce the minimum lot size in single-family zoning districts to 2,500 square feet or less so that existing standard size lots can be subdivided. That's not offering an option. It takes action to change the rules for most homes in most neighborhoods at this point. This also simultaneously would allow at least 3 units per lot in single-family zoning districts without requiring existing structures to be preserved. So this means that an existing lot of, say, 10,000 square feet could be subdivided into 4 lots, and now those 4 lots could be subdivided into at least 3 units, 12 units total. This simultaneous action means that an existing lot with 1 or 2 units won't necessarily have a gentle increment of growth. It could allow for a monumental shift without any planning. This could monumentally impact land speculation and exacerbate demolitions. And when you consider how we are essentially at the mercy of commercial STR operators and have very little ability to enforce STR rules, you could end up having your neighborhood explode with 12 units on an existing lot, and that lot could have multiple STRs. This also calls for eliminating minimum site area and building coverage requirements, and to eliminate the McMansion ordinance's applicability to this policy if more than 1 unit is built. I'm ready to make the prediction today that if the McMansion ordinance is changed to only be limited to 1 unit, we have enough wealth in this town that more than a few savvy builders are going to build McMansions under the guise of the building being more than 1 unit, and you may end up with a bigger house and call it a duplex or triplex, but that bigger duplex or triplex won't house any more people. It will just be bigger buildings. All of these potential unintended consequences we direct the manager to solve in 4 or 5 months. At the same time that we are initiating this, we are poised to eliminate the site plan requirements when you build 4 units or fewer elsewhere on the agenda. So that means if you have a lot today where this other proposal to move forward as drafted, it could lead to an existing lot having 1 or 2 units to be subdivided into lots that in total allow for 12 units, Because each of those newly subdivided lots have fewer than 4 units, you'd be able to build a total of 12 units, where today you have 1 or 2 and without a site plan review. So the code amendment where we think a site plan would still be required for, say, 5 units, suddenly we have a loophole where, in fact, as long as you subdivide the single-family lot first, as this resolution would allow for, that new 12-unit project requires no site plan for what would be a significant increased scale of development within a neighborhood. Again, I have a significant amount of skepticism that these scenarios can be mitigated within 4 to 5 months' time, given all the other directives and burdens we've already placed on our staff to be working on. And we're also not directing them to solve a particular problem. We're telling them very specifically how it has to be solved, which constrains the ability for them to come up with solutions to these unattended consequences. So I just wanted to make sure to share that. I hope that we will be providing folks with an opportunity to really speak to this issue. There is a lot of concern and questions that are out in the community, and I think that people deserve an opportunity to have their questions answered, and I don't agree that simply directing it is initiating a process when the direction tells them exactly how they have to do it.
Thank you, Councilmember Velasquez, and then Councilmember Harper Madison.
I wanted to echo what Councilmember Quadri said. This is one of the biggest steps we're taking forward, and thank you for bringing it forward. It provides a lot of flexibility, especially in my district, for getting some of this stuff done. I ran on housing, I ran on affordability, and I think this contributes a lot to it. I would also like to respectfully ask to add my name as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Harper Madison.
Thank you for the recognition. I guess I'll join the train and say thank you, Councilmember Poole, for bringing this forward. I also really appreciate that you brought it forward for the Housing and Planning Committee. I look forward to us really using our committees as a vehicle for bringing items like this forward. And I, too, would like to be added as a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, Councilmember Vela.
Just one final comment. Smaller lots are less expensive than bigger lots. That's just a reality of the housing market. You know, if you're a family on a tight budget, you buy a small car, you know, with a 4-cylinder engine. You know, you don't buy a F-150 extended cab. You know, our rules basically make us buy this huge lot, and you know, a 6,000 square foot lot costs much more than a 3,000 square foot lot. So I think it's just such an important step to take to bring back the possibility of home ownership to our middle and working class. And again, I appreciate Councilmember Poole's efforts so much. Thank you.
All right, thank you, members. That will take us to item number 124. The primary sponsor of that is Councilmember Ryan Alter, but Councilmember Kelly asked it to be pulled for question, and I'm going to recognize Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I just had one question, and I believe it is for the author of the resolution. What is the timeline for the city manager to implement the recommendations for the comprehensive notification system, ensuring timely implementation and accountability? I've been getting quite a few questions about that from my constituents, and as many of you know, I am a co-sponsor on this item, and so I just figured I'd reach out publicly to you and ask so that we could make it public.
It's a great question. You know, I think it will go through the process that the manager puts all our amendments through. So this is not the end of the story. It's
just the beginning.
That's right. That's right. Well, chapter 2. We'll say the auditors for chapter 1.
Okay.
But yes, this is just a piece of that process. This doesn't change it today, or I guess on Thursday.
Right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And with that, I yield.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to item number 128. The primary sponsor on that is Councilmember Quadri. Councilmember Kelly pulled it, I believe, and I want to say thank you. She pulled it so that we would see a proposed amendment so that it could be looked at 2 days in advance of the council meeting so that we can handle it in an efficient manner when we get to the council meeting. So since we're saying a lot of thank yous, I'll actually send her a card.
My daughter sent you a card the
Yeah,
other
I know
day.
that, and I greatly appreciated it. Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. So this is a resolution that I reviewed, and I really wanted to ensure accountability for the project and efficiency. So my staff passed out all the amendments that we will be discussing today. This one specifically would amend line 116 to direct the city manager to conduct regular evaluations and assessments of the South Shore Cultural District and their progress and impact, ensuring accountability and the ability to make adjustments based on community feedback and any potential changing needs.
Councilmember Cotter, you want to comment or?
I mean, I'm gonna keep the trend. I just want to thank Councilmember Kelly and her staff for bringing forward this amendment, for giving us the heads up, and I look forward to seeing it again on the dais on Thursday.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kelly. Item number 129, Councilmember Velasquez is the primary sponsor. Councilmember Kelly pulled it again so that we might have the opportunity to see a proposed amendment in advance. And I'll recognize Councilmember Kelly on the proposed amendment to item 129.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So the amendment I'm bringing forward for 129, the language is not explicitly in the resolution. As many of you know, I cover both Williamson and Travis counties in my district, and I know that other council members might have Hayes County. So it directs the city manager, well, it encourages the city manager, there's a very particular piece of language difference there, to collaborate with neighboring jurisdictions and regional entities to develop a coordinated approach to affordable housing, leveraging resources and sharing best practices to address the broader housing crisis in our region.
Councilmember Velasquez?
I also wanted to thank Councilmember Kelly for bringing the amendment early, also for setting the bar for all of us wild ones that get amendments in the very last minute. I think it is a good bar to set for the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Yes, Councilmember Ryan Alter.
I just have a quick question about the amendment for Councilmember Kelly. Is this amendment specifically related to coordination and best practices for the SMART program or for affordable housing at large?
So if it were a perfect world, I'd love to do this for affordable housing at large, but it specifically is just for this resolution, because otherwise I believe that would fall outside of our posting for the Open Meetings Act.
All right. Thank you so much.
So maybe you'll see a part 2 sometime.
Can't wait.
All right, well done. That'll take us to item number 131. The primary sponsor of item 131 is Councilmember Qadri. Councilmember Kelly has pulled item 131 to discuss 2 potential amendments. I'll recognize Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. So my first amendment is really aimed at the technology and data analytics that are used to monitor and manage curb space. And it just wasn't explicitly in the resolution itself, and so I thought putting it in there would make the public aware that such technology exists. So it says in the amendment, it would amend line 34 to state, the city manager is directed to explore the potential for using technology and data analytics to monitor and manage curb space, including the utilization of sensors, smart parking systems, and real-time information tools to improve efficiency and reduce congestion. And then my second amendment would amend line 54 to encourage the city manager to consider public safety and emergency response needs in the curb management plan, ensuring that curb space is optimized while allowing for efficient access for emergency vehicles and maintaining public safety standards. And this amendment specifically came out of me driving through my district and recognizing that some of the space could be utilized more effectively. In a lot of places, there's very little to no access for emergency vehicles based on how the curbs are being managed on specific streets in my district, which is concerning if they need that emergency access.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Qadri, I'll recognize you on the 2 proposed amendments.
Yeah, I just want to thank Councilmember Kelly and her staff for bringing those forward. But I just want to kind of highlight, I understand that staff has some short-term bandwidth issues right now with other projects that we've given them. So I've asked to postpone this item until the August 31st meeting.
Okay?
Mayor, could I just add,
Yes.
Councilmember Qadri, if you might consider, if you have a version 2, maybe adding these amendments to that, if it comes back, that would be awesome. If not, I completely understand.
Yeah, I mean, we'll look into it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Qadri. Members, please note, item 131 has, the primary sponsor has asked that we pull that. those are all the pre-selected agenda items that I'm aware of that anyone had indicated they want to talk about at this work session. Item number 12 is an item that has been postponed. It will not be on the agenda on Thursday. However, Councilmember Fuentes wanted to be heard at the work session on item number 12, so I want to recognize Councilmember Fuentes.
Thank you, Mayor. And I hate to break the train, but I am not giving thanks as part of my comments on this, but actually I have a request to the city manager that we have a briefing on the service plan. Colleagues, the creation of a tourism public improvement district is a big one, and it's a topic that has been long time talked about in our community, and one that deserves the time and attention of this dais and the consideration of our community. This TPID is one that many cities have. In fact, I was in Fort Worth this past weekend watching a Peso Pluma concert, and I saw on my hotel bill that they have a TPID. And so it's one that it's great for our city to be exploring, and there needs to be that consideration for what that looks like. One thing that is clear to me as part of this conversation, the previous council of 2019-2020 had an intent for this TPID, and that included 40% dedication towards homelessness services. And that is a need that our community has today, and if not a greater one. And I just want to note that on our council agenda for Thursday, we are slated to approve a $20 million contract for homelessness encampment cleanups, a $9 million contract for marshalling yard temporary emergency services. That is $29 million that we are poised to approve. And this TPID has an important piece in how we're able to have a dedicated revenue source towards directing homelessness, which has a tourism impact. And so I think it's important that importantly to note that this TPID is a revenue source that is on visitors to our great city. So we need to ensure, and for me, I want to ensure that we are dedicating as much as we can towards homelessness, and that we have that conversation as a matter of public policy. And so, Manager, I formally request a briefing on the service plan, and just wanted to share my thoughts on that.
Well, we'll do the briefing, and the only comments I'd make, and I hope, and we'll engage with you and the entire council, as was noted earlier, we have a fiscal crisis that's looming for us in terms of homelessness that we need to resolve. We need to develop our own guardrail about what is appropriate for the city to fund and what other agencies need to step forward. And I would urge all members of council and the mayor, when revenue sources are delivered, it is the city council's responsibility to determine all your priorities, which are beyond homelessness. It's about childcare. It's about parks and recreation. It's about our cultural arts. It's about our libraries. You have an enormous amount of resources requirement, and any resources that come in ought not to be precluded just because because one council cannot commit another council. So if that discussion took place in 19, you shouldn't feel obligated to do what somebody said in 19, but we should consider all the needs of the city and determine where the priority fits or doesn't fit. And we'll have that discussion when we bring the TPID forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Members, yes, Councilmember Alison Alter.
Thank you. I wanted to add to that. I mean, I think the conversation in 2019 were, how does the hotel industry contribute via this source to community benefits, homelessness being the one that was cited at that point in 2019. And I think there's been some changes in law, et cetera, that are frustrating at minimum. But I think this is an important conversation that we need to be having. We just had a conversation earlier about the importance of philanthropy and the role of philanthropy in our community. But, philanthropy in a lot of these other communities has a lot to do with corporate philanthropy. And, this is a mechanism where this could happen by. So I definitely think we should be considering that. I also wanted to bring up item 92, which has to do with council procedures. I don't know that we can just I'm fine with punting it this week. We have 190-some items, but it was pulled by the city manager, and I think ultimately we have to be deciding our own rules and what those look like. And I think there are some things that we did in the past that were valuable, that our community is asking us to do again, that I think would benefit public engagement. And I don't know exactly what the process is moving forward on that item, but I don't think we can keep ignoring the request that we have to find a way for people to be able to donate time. I understand it's complicated and difficult for donating of time with the virtual speakers, but there may be a way that we can do that for those who are showing up. And if the person who's donating is actually showing up in the room, there may be a way that we can do that. I think it was very helpful when we had an opportunity when there were several speakers to hear them at once when we were deliberating the topic if people chose. I think it's good the way the mayor is allowing them to have the opportunity at the beginning, but I think that there's a coherence that happens when you hear people speaking specific to a time. I think that 1 minute on certain topics is really not enough time for people to communicate with us, and that we need to be thinking about how we do that, and we've been limiting that down no matter the number of speakers that we have. So I think there's some questions that we should be asking with respect to that. And then I also found very valuable when we had a certain number of speakers would pull something from the consent agenda so that we would have at least a little bit more of a conversation over an item. I found that was very valuable when we used to do that. And I think it allows people to have the sense that we are listening and paying attention, which is of value. But I really wanted to ask the mayor what he felt the process was moving forward on 92. I'm not sure this is something that is the city manager's purview to decide for us.
First of all, in the 6 months that this council has been together, no one's ever had just 1 minute to speak. Secondly, many of the proposed changes that you just referenced have been allowed to be done. For example, at the last meeting, there's been a request from the public a number of times that instead of the applicant just having 5 minutes to speak, those in opposition would have 5 minutes to speak, and that's been allowed. Another thing that you mentioned is the idea that you get to speak at the time of the item that's being discussed. What has been done in the past 6 months is you can speak at the time the item is being discussed, but you can also speak at 10 o'clock if that is better for your schedule. So that has been meant, you referenced it in such a way that it sounded like there was an effort to limit, but to the contrary, it is an effort to allow more flexibility for the person who wishes to be heard on the item. With that all being said, one of the things that had been indicated when this was first brought up was that questions about or suggestions that might be made in order to make it where it would work better, since you're talking about a multi-page document that needs to have this change or that change, would be that people would make suggestions on the message board which hadn't occurred. And in addition to that, and the word was that we had a number of changes, and so in an effort to manage the agenda, as you point out, this is the first meeting. Thursday will be the first meeting since a break was taken, and it felt, the agenda looks a little like everybody thought that it was the last meeting of the year. In an effort to somewhat manage that agenda, items that we knew that it was known was going to take a long period of time, as this one is anticipated, since the pre-work that we thought was going to be done hasn't been done. That was one that we pulled so that we would be in a position to spend a little bit more time on it before the next meeting. My anticipation, as you requested from me, is that at the next meeting we would do this, and I look forward to hearing from folks about what the suggested changes are between now and then, as opposed to just then on the dais.
Thank you. And Mayor, I was referring to what was in the proposal, not necessarily what the current procedures. I'm sorry if it was interpreted that way. People have been asking about it and
Sure.
asking for the clarity, and because we've been deviating so much. There's a lack of clarity, which is, I think, creating confusion, and people are not understanding. And the proposal does something different than what we've been doing. And I didn't mean to imply that that was how you were running the meetings, but having the proposal out there and having the differences, I think, is creating some confusion and some apprehension. And I also wanted to just mention some things that I thought that we were doing in the past pre-pandemic that I thought were useful for us in terms of engagement.
All right. Well, I look forward to a more thorough discussion at the time. For those that are watching and thinking you wanted to sign up on item number 92, which a number of people already have, item number 92 will be postponed. It will not be on the agenda this Thursday. So for the public that is interested in this item, you don't need to come down here to speak on this item because it will have been postponed. Is there anything before we go into executive session? Great. Members, the City Council will now go into closed session to take up two items. Pursuant to Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, the City Council will discuss legal issues related to item E1, Texas House Bill 2127, and pursuant to Section 551.072 of the Government Code, the City Council will discuss real estate matters related to E2, the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of an interest in two parcels located at 1215 Red River Street and 606 East 12th Street in Austin, Texas, also known as the Health South site. Is there any objection to going into the executive session concerning the items that have been announced? Hearing none, the council